What is an interrupt?
It's an event which stops CPU execution to process something else, called an interrupt service routine.
How would you implement a queue using only the stack data structure?
You can use two stacks.
Can you implement that code?
Absolutely. Hi there, I'm Alex and this is my channel Sinspiration, where I inspire you to develop a growth mindset. This is how to prepare and ace interviews part 3, technical questions. If you haven't watched part 1 or part 2, check out the links in the description below to learn about basic tips and behavioral questions. Interviewing is a skill that needs to be practiced consistently to get good at. I have been interviewing every year since 2014 and gotten a handful of offers along the way. I'll be honest, this video was a little bit difficult to make because everyone's technical questions are different based on the job being interviewed for. I've done hardware, software, and machine learning interviews, so I can go into detail into these areas, but I think it may not be applicable to many of you watching this video. I do plan on making videos that go in depth into these areas, but after much thought, today I will focus on general advice using my technical interview questions as examples. I've seen many influencers create content on how to get a job in software engineering, but most people look for different types of jobs. So I figured I can play a role in creating content that is applicable to a wider audience. There are 4 types of technical questions you can expect in your interviews. I listed these categories to the best of my ability: conceptual explanations, whiteboarding and coding, role-playing and systems design, and presentations. Conceptual explanations are straightforward questions to test your knowledge and understanding. These are facts and theories that you learn from school, books, and even your projects and work experience. That is why remembering these details on your resume is crucial. But how should you study for conceptual technical questions? 2 ways. Just interview and see what kind of questions are asked, and look them up online. The former is more representative because, well, they're actual interview questions asked present day. The good news is, over the years, the same questions get asked for a particular role you're applying for. Interviewers tend to ask similar questions they were asked to get their current job. So, the more questions you see and the more often you see them, chances are you'll get better at answering them. For example, I interviewed for embedded software engineer roles the past few years. These are some of the questions I got asked by almost every single company. What is a pointer? Tell me the difference between a stack and heap. And what does it mean when a variable is defined as volatile? When I was asked these questions for the very first time, I gave answers that weren't 100% correct or complete. So if I missed these questions during an interview, I'd write them down and then look up the answers so I can answer them better next time. This is part of having a growth mindset, by the way. At first, I made mental notes like, okay, for the stack and heap question, I have to mention A, B, and C. Over time, it became too overwhelming to memorize answers in my short-term memory. To retain this in my long-term memory, to truly learn and understand it and give precise answers, I started a doc where I wrote down questions and answers. In addition, I'd search online for interview questions and add them here. You can see I've also included links to web pages I find useful so I don't have to copy everything. It's essentially a study guide or a cheat sheet with unlimited pages. Really smart people can learn something once and master it. But for most of us, it'll probably take a couple of times. With all my conceptual questions organized in one place, I just need to review it before a new round of interviews. And every time I review it again, it sticks into my long-term memory. As my dad would tell me, to learn, you've got to overlearn. Whiteboarding or coding questions test how well you apply your knowledge and skills, as well as how well you communicate your ideas. It heavily involves your thought process, which sometimes is more important than the right answer. It's how you arrived at the correct answer rather than the right answer itself that interviewers look for, at least in tech interviews. Before you start writing and coding, Follow this process. Restate the problem, ask clarification questions, and mention any assumptions. Suggest an approach to solve the problem. Include high-level details of your steps. Here, you can mention the brute force method and say it's not efficient, so you're going to try a better method and improve on it once you have a working solution. Continue to discuss with your interviewer until both of you agree on the approach. Finally, start writing or coding, explaining the steps along the way. If you get stuck, ask questions and you may be given hints. There are people who jump straight into solving the problem and stay silent until they arrive at their solution. Most of us have done that at one point, but let's not moving forward. Usually your interviewer wants to help you and wants you to succeed. Treat them as your colleague and as if you're working on this problem together. This communication and teamwork is what interviewers look for. I think the best way to practice these questions is to do them yourself while talking out loud. You can also do a mock interview with a friend, family member, or a professional resource. For whiteboarding, you can give yourself a question, then solve it on paper, but explaining your thought process as you're doing it. For coding, it's a similar approach. Don't just start coding. Reiterate the problem and explain your approach first. After you have your solution, use 1 or 2 test cases to prove your code works. Mention corner cases as well and make modifications if necessary. I've created a spreadsheet of important coding problems to track my progress. You can see I've included the links, my status, the question type, what companies have asked these questions, and my own notes on how to solve them in the most efficient ways. After practicing several times, I started to get the hang of it and was able to solve harder questions. Role-playing and systems design are open-ended questions. These are a little more difficult to practice yourself, but you should still do as much preparation as you can. Typically, you'll be given a scenario and you have to think on the spot and respond immediately. For role-playing, let's say you have a customer you're working with is unhappy with a problem. What would you do? My approach would be something along the lines of asking the customer what is on their mind to understand the problem in their perspective, gathering as much information as possible, and then isolating the problem. Offer advice and details to the best of my knowledge to see if we can work out a solution. Ask my colleague or manager for advice or hints. If we still can't work something out, I'll go back and do research and then get back to the customer within a day. This approach also works with colleagues who would like your help. For systems design, it's somewhat similar to solving a coding problem, but the solution isn't something you can memorize. It really depends on the specifications given to you by your interviewer. You'll have to apply your knowledge from your projects and work to solve these. Treat this as a conversation with your future colleague, as if you're both trying to work together to come up with a solution to a complex problem, and ask questions along the way. My last systems design question was to draw out the system diagram of my NATCAR line following robot, from the actuators to electronics and software control. To prepare for systems design questions, do more questions and get the big picture, and use online interview prep resources. Some companies may ask you to prepare a presentation in front of the whole team you may end up working with for your on-site or panel interview. This can be about a project you did in school or a major assignment from your current or previous jobs. Typically, startups and smaller companies do this in lieu of having each team member ask you about your resume. That way, they can focus more on just technical questions. Pick something you enjoy doing, know thorough details about, and is related to the job you're interviewing for. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so be prepared to have your brains picked. I recommend rehearsing a few times so you time it properly and ensure your presentation flows smoothly. If you picked a topic from work experience, be careful not to disclose proprietary information. Overall, I don't think it carries much weight compared to your technical interviews with each person, from my experience. This may be different depending on the type of job you're applying for. Still, you'll want to prepare well for this and leave a positive impression from the beginning. In terms of importance by weight between the basics, behavioral questions, and technical questions is, you've guessed it if you've watched parts 1 and 2, 60%. Master the tips from all three parts and you're on your way to passing your interviews. Be sure to check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't already. Links are in the description below. One important piece of advice I haven't mentioned. If you don't know the answer to something, don't pretend to know it. Giving incorrect answers is worse than no answer at all. You can state what you know to your interviewer, and he or she may give you hints so that you arrive at a correct answer. I now ask you to start creating a doc for your conceptual questions, a spreadsheet for your whiteboard and coding questions, and a doc for your role-playing and systems design questions. It will accumulate over time, and as you study it over and over again, you'll master them and answer correctly every single time for the rest of your career. Consistent practice is key. When you ace those interviews and get those job offers, you can thank me by hitting the like button, commenting below, and subscribing to my channel, Sinspiration, for more tips on self-growth, personal finance, career development, and education. Also, follow me on TikTok and Instagram for shorts and reels. You've been Sinspired today. Next week, I'll make a video about my interviewing journey. Stay tuned.